And we're the Non-Prophets. I'm Denis Loubet, along with Jamie Boone and a version of the amazing Matt Dillahunty. We're coming to you live from the Free Thought Library in Austin, Texas on the 5th of September, 2018, or at least we're presenting a reasonable facsimile of that. This show is sponsored by the atheist community of Austin, which is the spitting image of a nonprofit educational organization for the promotion of positive atheism and the separation of church and state. If you want to learn more about the ACA, you can call their voicemail at 512-220-6561 or visit their website at www.atheist-community.org. The Non-Prophets broadcasts live every first and third Wednesday of each month from 7:30 to 9 Central Time, just as it would if it was real. You can join the Non-Prophets chat room by following the directions at www.nonprofitsradio.com. So sit back and enjoy this representation of the show.
Yeah, that was delightful as always, I think.
Thank you.
I wonder which version of Matt I am.
Yeah, I was going to say, someone earlier today
We'll find out.
Sent a message, and they were like, oh, and on today's episode of The Non-Prophets, it will be the Father, the Son, and the Holy Voice of atheism or something, which is good. I like that bit between us is still alive. But,
Yes.
you know, welcome to the show. Welcome back, I should say, even to the mixed-up lineup.
It's like I'm here all the time now.
Yeah, it's like you've got spare time at the ACA, coming around, doing stuff.
Yeah.
How you been?
That's not a question we want to
No,
start the show.
yeah, okay. As soon as I asked that, I went, oh, yeah.
I probably shouldn't ask that question.
Well,
I'm doing okay.
So I asked you before the show if there was anything particular in the news that you felt like you wanted to bring up. But as I recall, you didn't have much. But did you end up seeing the McCain funeral at all?
I think I saw a clip of it and a minute or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not.
I watched
okay.
more of the Aretha Franklin funeral than I did of the McCain.
Yeah, well, that's understandable.
Though I wanted to, if just to hear Mr. O speak. So, you know.
Mr. O.
It's so awesome.
The reason I bring it up, even though I haven't made the time to watch it yet, is that apparently it's a fantastic reminder of what politics in our country used to be. Where it was disagreement, but like at least a lip service to civility. But I don't know. It's interesting to think that our politics have become much more religious, or at least the elected officials. Overtly,
yeah.
and much less, you know, decorous. And I don't know. I don't know if I haven't been around and watching the news as long. No offense.
Well, it seemed that it used to be way back that both parties kind of were trying to help we're governing, right? And so it wasn't it was the American people need this thing. I have my opinion on how to get there, and the other party had their opinion of how to get there. But now it's like, I don't know, there's a good party and an evil party, or whatever you want, however you want to categorize it. But it's like there's no middle ground anymore. There's no.
I think I'm going to be more cynical, and I try not to be, but it's almost unavoidable at this point. I'm not sure that was ever true.
Here we go.
I think that. So one of the reasons that like the past presidents, excluding the current one, can get along is, let's face it, nobody other than those guys really knows what that job is like. And you're probably going to have, all of them are going to be narcissistic in some fashion. You can't be the leader of the free world without that kind of thing. But they're also, you know, I agree with what Dennis is saying, where perhaps, you know, they really want to do good, but they have different ideals. But the fundamental difference that I see is that we live in a rapidly changing world. And yes, I know we had internet access from, you know, Clinton forward and stuff, but not like this.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that more people are paying attention to more news. And I wonder if you went back to, you know, I mean, you go back to the McCarthy hearings, you go back to what was going on with Nixon and these, and at various times, I'm not really sure that there's any more or less being accomplished at any given point.
Right.
There's a lot of it that's just perception. And I remember
there were points where things were shit, and you were going, how are we going to recover from this?
There are a lot of people who were very much Chicken Little Sky is Falling the entire time that Bush was president. And he will go down in history as our worst president was like the mantra.
Hold my beer.
Boy, now we're nostalgic for that.
Yeah.
and the fact that, the Obamas and the Bushes got along, what that ends up doing in some cases is fueling the Alex Jones contingent of, it doesn't really matter who you vote for, they're all part of one big cabal, and so you get, and I think that with the frustration that we see with people coming out and becoming more anti-science and becoming more conspiracy-minded along that, I don't know that I have a good way to determine how good or bad things are, how much or how little is being accomplished. And I think it's one of those things that you can only if you're trying to look back at it in hindsight, you run the risk of being nostalgic for the good old days when we tend to know that the good old days are now. As much as I hate to say that, given.
Well, actually, I would just ask to clarify, when you say more or less is being accomplished, do you mean like laws being passed, or?
Well, it's like there's a good chunk of what's happening now that is more about undoing.
Yeah.
And I get that there is an ideology that would say, hey, we've made mistakes and we need to undo those mistakes. I don't agree that they were mistakes, but I at least know what they're coming from. The part where I really agree with what Dennis was saying was, I remember, and it may be nostalgic, so I'm exercising some skepticism here, things like, the gas crisis or big issues related to poverty. And we tried things. We didn't always come up with the right solution. But there seemed to be, Tip O'Neill could sit down and cross party lines no matter how awful or decent he may have been.
Right.
That, I agree, seems to have vanished.
It's over.
And it's not. And I don't want to dig in too deep. I don't even see it along party lines. I see it as this party lost the election, and so they can't muster any energy to actually do anything productive. And the other party, while they ostensibly won an election, don't have any control over their party or the ideology, and can't. I mean, they're kind of going after Jeff
pulling
Sessions
in all
and everybody else
directions.
left and right. And there's the spinelessness across the board. It's like
that's true. I can't argue with that.
I understand the third party sentiment, even if I can't go that way.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I think you were trying to ask a question or say something before I asked.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I could go on ages about people that just say, oh, just vote third party and it'll fix everything.
Oh, no.
Wrong.
No.
But I get that. Right? Like, there's something to be said about the political establishment in both of the major parties in the U.S. being detached from the American people, at least ostensibly. Like, the internet itself has changed a lot, and we have senators that are confused about how Mark Zuckerberg makes money, trying to pass laws about it, and so of course they don't understand. But I would say that there's something to be said about the lack of sort of rising stars with experience in the Democratic Party, and there being like 1 million people that run for president on the Republican ticket every 4 years now, and so God,
I hope so.
Oh, yeah,
because it creates an incredible wealth of quote mining. Yeah.
Well, if it's every 4 years, that means we're going to have some potential challengers. That's kind of what it was.
Well, I was shying away from that because I'm not sure what the legal limit on saying things that qualify as electioneering is.
That's really easy. I'm not allowed to endorse candidates. I can speak on issues all day long.
Okay.
There we go.
But
I am understandably
I'm actually not.
More. What?
It's actually not that. I will sit up here and criticize, I was going to say both parties, but all parties at the drop of a hat.
Right.
It's frustrating because
cheers.
There are people who are looking at the world and saying, okay, like from a humanist perspective, what sort of representatives will we like? I'm not convinced we have anybody from a humanist perspective that
Oh, yeah.
Or at least not very many, and certainly not a power base of, you know, humanist, secular or religious. I don't care, but somebody who's got the well-being of humanity and not just, you know, even the country. By the way, we got email because on one episode of the Atheist Experience, I scoffed at the notion that the United States was imperialistic. And people are like, what the hell are you talking about? Of course they are. Of course they are. And I was like, okay, there's different connotations of the world. I mean, we're not running around conquering people and taking over their country to create an empire. I'm not denying that we are meddling and working in our best interest.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say
we're doing a subterfuge of the same thing.
There's a reason that in poli-sci the word neocolonialism has been coined.
We're treating the rest of the world like Puerto Rico, where we want to get the benefits but not the responsibilities of making a
Puerto
state.
Rico. That actually in the last 3 weeks, finally the government of Puerto Rico released the revised and definitely more accurate
death toll.
Yeah, death toll. Sorry, I was trying to avoid the phrase body count because I knew that was wrong. But yeah, before that it was listed at 64, and now it is listed.
2,000.
The number that I remember is 2,974, but I'll check that. But
that's almost as many people as the Catholic Church has covered up sexual molestation.
Almost. And then it's
no, it's not even close.
Well, I mean, in this that we're in the latest report alone. Victims. I also, that's an 800-page document that I'm trying to work my way through. It's makes for depressing reading.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you guys have cracked that.
And my favorite memes from the week have been about all the people who are upset over Nike. And don't seem to be that upset over the Catholic Church shielding rapists.
Yep.
I didn't hear what happened with Nike in the last few weeks. That's
Nike made Colin Kaepernick the face of Nike, and all the people who are either
wrongly patriotic,
racist, overly patriotic, or just grossly ignorant of the facts, who are like, oh, how dare they take a knee during the national anthem? That's just terrible. I'm going to burn my Nikes because of that. I mean, this is just...
And now it's a thing.
One of my favorite, apart from the memes comparing their outrage over that to their lack of outrage in other areas, one of my favorites was somebody said, it would be really nice if, like, Ford, like, made Colin the face of the F-150, just so the rednecks would go out and burn their F-150s in effigy. Ford, you done screwed us over. I'm going to Dodge next. I'm going to light this some bitch on fire. How dare they?
What if it was just like all of the American car companies did that, but Toyota and Mitsubishi didn't? And it was like, what would they do?
It was funny because in the process of cleaning up my house and everything else, I found a whole bunch of flags that I had bought because around the time that Trump was running for president, there was talk about we're going to make flag burning illegal, and I was like, holy crap! This is the MacGuffin that rears its ugly head every few
time.
Years.
Yeah.
And so I have a whole bunch of flags in different sizes, but I also have some that are printed incorrectly and that aren't made of the right material. And so I was going to go through and make a video burning them and talking about, hey, look, here's another flag. And is it okay to burn this one? Because this one's actually made wrong. It's dimensionally wrong. Or this one has the wrong colors. Or this one was made in China. What exactly are the standards to determine whether or not I can burn a flag? And oh, by the way, the one and only standard is that I'm a free human being who can burn a flag if I want to.
Yep.
Nobody, it reminds me of drawing Muhammad. Nobody drew Muhammad until the Muslims said, hey, you can't draw Muhammad.
Yeah.
Right.
Almost nobody would burn a flag until there's somebody trying to say you can't do it.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
Apart from, political protests.
Yeah.
But I'm a veteran. I was in the military for more than 8 years. To whatever extent I actually worked to protect freedoms, including free expression and free speech.
Yeah.
Don't tell me that I can't exercise that. I swear. The next time they raise this, I've got all the flags ready. I've got kerosene. I've got a burn barrel. And as long as there's no burn ban in effect in Austin, my ass is going to be making a video about burning flags. And I don't want to do that or need to do that. I didn't want to draw Muhammad.
Yeah.
But I did. That's right, Muslims. I drew
the
Muhammad right after you said not to.
It's the right thing to do.
It is. I was going to say, do you want help with that video? Because demonstrations about what free speech is and should be, or
yeah, if
whatever.
it turns out, I mean, it's not high on my priority list. But there we go, 18,000 topics in the first few minutes.
Yeah.
All
Cool.
from my rambling mind.
Excellent. I plan on stealing some of them. So
Please do.
Race you to them.
If you make money off of it, though, I get a cut.
Deal. If it's me, if the ACA doesn't,
Right.
whatever. Let's see. Do we have mail? I know we didn't get a lot of it.
Not really.
All right. Well, my understanding is that you have a question.
I do. That's kind of, yeah. We can do that. I have a question.
I don't know. Dennis has a question.
Yep.
What's your question,
I have
Dennis?
a question. Do Christians believe in the natural world?
Elaborate.
Well, if you look at their creation myth, everything in the universe was deliberately designed and spoken into existence with magic words. That doesn't seem natural.
Ah.
And so it seems like there's no such thing as nature. Everything's a designed contraption, a thing.
So the question is, for me,
Yeah.
do you want like the actual answer, or are we just having fun?
Well,
Yes.
yeah, I kind of want the, well, we're doing both, but
Choose
what's
which
the
one.
actual answer?
Yeah.
If I bake a cake, that doesn't mean that the cake is made of my substance. The entire point is that a supernatural being should, if it had sufficient power, be able to create something that is natural and then self-sustaining. So in the same sense that the cause of the Big Bang
Right.
is not co-equal to the substance of the Big Bang. So you could have a supernatural cause of the Big Bang, you could have a metanatural cause of the Big Bang, or you could have a I guess, hypernatural cause where there's the broader universe we don't know. But the fact that a god does magic to bring something into existence doesn't tell you what the thing that is brought into existence, whether it is magical. So like if I'm on stage performing something, hey, fake magic is real magic's fake, as far as we know. Thanks, Randy. And so if I take smoke and put it in my hands and form an ice cube from it. Now what I'm doing is I'm actually not doing anything supernatural, but I'm emulating the supernatural, which is to take nothing or smoke and transubstantiate it into something that is real and natural, which is the ice cube. So as a former Christian, when we're talking about the substance, natural is just the word we use to describe all of the processes in the universe that we
all the designed, deliberately designed processes.
Yes, but it's like, okay,
that's the opposite of I mean,
I can write a
that's
computer
the definition
program.
of artificial, is if something is designed and built.
Sure. Now, so this goes back to something you said years ago on this program.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Which talking about the watchmaker argument.
Yes.
When you, and I've borrowed this, I don't know, 53,000 times.
Really? Good.
Where you talked about, if they're right, we are walking through on a beach of watches in a universe of watches and picking up one particular watch and saying, look how special this is.
Yes.
The difference here is that there's two different kind of views on this, which is the notion that God manipulates and makes and fixes everything. So God even constructs a grain of sand. The other view is that God got the universe rolling, tampers from time to time, but he doesn't construct every single grain of sand.
Oh, but that doesn't jibe with if they call the God omniscient and all powerful, then and that's the God that created the universe, then he cannot escape the fact that he knows the path of every subatomic particle from beginning to end.
But knowing the path and even selecting the path doesn't tell you anything about the substance of the path.
Substance.
Can you elaborate on what
So
you mean by
I would agree with you that what you're describing, this three-pronged God, annihilates any notion of free will. Because if God made this universe and had options about other universes, then he specifically chose the universe in which we're having this conversation right now.
Yep.
So there was no free will involved.
Right.
That is separate from the fact that somebody creates something through a process, let's say magic, doesn't tell you whether the thing they created is magical.
well, the thing doesn't have to be magical, but how can you say it's natural?
Well, natural is just a label we put on the things that we experience in nature. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say that's kind of. I was about to say, well, that sounds like a not complete description, but it sounded like you were moving on to describe what nature was in that context.
As far as we know, nature is everything. We don't know of anything beyond nature.
Right.
The explanation here is that, or the thing that they're reaching for is that there must have been something greater than nature or outside of nature that created nature. But the fact that that thing is supernatural and had intention doesn't mean that what it created is not natural. You're talking about the origin of everything is not natural, in which case you're correct. But
right.
I'm saying that.
But everything's also designed.
I think.
But design doesn't necessarily mean it's not natural.
Yeah.
That's what's so weird. Design seems to be the very definition of artificial.
I agree. So
it's a word game, but
so we're talking about two different things.
Yeah.
We recognize design by contrasting it with nature.
Right.
This is the thing that I've brought up over and over again.
And that's what I would.
If it's naturally occurring, fine. We contrast that with artificial. Like my cell phone is not naturally occurring.
Right.
It's constructed by an intelligence.
Yeah.
But the fact that I constructed it doesn't mean that it is intelligent. Just like this,
Sure.
one can't.
I think I may be able to hit at some of where there's a disconnect here. When you're talking about whether or not, like the natural world, I think you're talking, if I'm not mistaken, about what people think of as an aspect of what we call nature, which is that it is naturally occurring.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as the things that exist, right, like Pluto or whatever, you're saying that they exist, and you're saying that Christians believe that they exist, but you are saying, I think Pluto is natural because it occurred as a process of gravity, etc.
Right.
I'm not a cosmologist, so I'm stopping there. And that Christians are saying it was deliberately designed by an intelligence, and that seems to contrast with this idea that nature is naturally occurring. And if I'm not mistaken, what you're saying is that just because something created what we call nature doesn't mean that it's not naturally occurring in that context.
Yeah, whether the origin and process by which it came into existence is natural is separate from whether or not it is of natural substance. Okay. But this is why I was mentioning there's a couple different views on this, because not every view has God creating every blade of grass or every tree on a constant basis. As a matter of fact, most modern theologians, in the same way that they've redefined omnipotence as all power that is logically possible, would say that God is basically what kicked it all off, created the natural processes, defined the natural laws, and then everything else comes about through those natural laws. So that God doesn't have to make the bush in our front yard. That's the result of a seed from its parents.
But he created every subatomic particle.
Well, no, all he had to do was create the process by which subatomic particles come into existence.
Dennis, is part of your...
It's like writing. It's like writing a video game.
All right.
Sims, for example, that can then go off and do stuff. Once I create the structure and the rules under which they work, I'm no longer picking everything that happens. Now, this is going to be separate from being able to know the future or anything else. I'm just saying there's a model in which God is basically only the first cause for the Big Bang, and after that, everything follows the natural laws that were set up.
Right. But of course, young Earth creationists don't believe that.
Yeah, well, you know, if we're just going to go with young Earth creationists, we'd have to do a whole other show. So,
okay.
Dennis's question for young Earth creationists, probably not.
Yeah, because
they probably don't.
They don't go with this ancient Big Bang. Yeah,
they probably think they do.
Probably think that they believe in nature, but don't.
To them, it's got to be that we are dirt golems walking around in a universe-sized diorama, because it's.
Yeah, they have a problem. They have a couple of problems.
Oh, yeah.
One is that they simultaneously believe in free will, but they also believe in the exact things that would eliminate any hope of free will.
Right.
Okay, so that's especially on the young Earth creationists. There's the others who are like, you know, God only meddles from time to time, but the rest is natural occurring. And And so, like in the same way that modern theologians have redefined omnipotence to be all power that is logically possible, they'll do the same thing with omniscience. Because the Bible, by the way, doesn't use those words.
Right, I know.
And
nor does it say we have free will, does it? It doesn't use the...
It suggests that there is freedom to choose, but it also suggests that that free will can be violated by God, and also that it is irrelevant, that faith comes by grace through faith.
Right.
And that is a gift of God. It's not something you chose. It's something God imbues you with.
Yeah, and it seems that every story in the Bible that deals with predicting the future, when the God makes a prophecy, is like, well, if people state their free will decision not to do what the prophecy says, and yet find themselves doing what the prophecy says, no amount of free will can change that. So what good is it?
Because
what good is it?
It expressly says that there's nothing that happens that is not according to God's plan.
Right.
That verse
that
alone.
Right there is
so
like the death knell.
If prophets are given the gift of prophecy by God, is the phrase that I've heard when I've spoken to people. Does that mean that they are given the gift of prophecy and then use it as it is, or they pray and God gives them prophecies?
Nobody knows.
I don't know.
I think.
Well, I mean, I don't believe that any of this actually happens.
No. I'm saying that even the people who are advocating it can't agree on this.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
can they agree on anything?
No. Okay. Which is why there's over 1,000 denominations in Christianity.
That's right.
But they're in more disagreement.
Well, prophecy, I mean, that's a limited subset within Christianity as well, because when you talk about the gifts of the Spirit, love, peace, joy, blah, 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 but also there's the gifts of, oh, crap, and I'm not going to get them all right. But if you're talking about prophecy, that is a good question. Let's say God has given me the gift of prophecy. Does that mean that I am now able to just make predictions that are going to come true? Okay. Or does it mean that God will tell me things that I then relay? Because if God is just telling me things that I then relay, it's not me that has the gift of prophecy.
Yeah.
It's God. What God is doing is just basically using me as the mouthpiece.
Right.
I am Aaron to Moses. But if I have the gift of prophecy, it's still not me, because all the information still has to come from something beyond me. I'm merely a human being, and so this is why when the Bible talks about prophets, it said, well, you can tell the ones that are truly speaking on behalf of God by whether or not their prophecies come true.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is the most confirmation bias heavy statement that you could probably.
Well, the one thing, a thought experiment I like to present is, okay, what if the God comes down and starts whispering to you everything you're going to do? You're going to sit in that chair. You're going to have pizza this evening. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. And no amount of free will that you can muster will change that. You'll end up doing exactly one thing. And so the God coming down and whispering to you everything you're going to do shows you the strings that are making you a complete puppet. But the fact that he doesn't do that doesn't change the fact that the strings are there.
Yeah,
that's true. It does say something about our culture, right? Which to contrast with the culture in the United States, contrasting with the politics of the United States, as I stand, in that shows like Westworld present that problem because
no spoilers.
Yes, please, no.
It's from the first.
I have not seen it.
I don't care. I've watched the first episode and then I put it on hold.
Well, never mind.
I can take here. Let me unplug
it.
and you can go ahead and do spoilers.
Well, all right. Here, I'll hold up this pen, and if you don't want spoilers, are neither of you going to listen?
Right, neither of us are going to listen.
Oh wow, that's going to ruin the show. So.
Well, so for the audience, then I'll make this statement. As long as I'm holding up this pen, it's spoilers, and when I put it down, it's not. There's a part where
I just lost my thing, and now we're on the
one of the
show ever.
This is the best show ever. I don't know what you're talking about.
It for us.
You're welcome. No,
I'll be in the other room.
Never mind. There are aspects, there are things that come up in shows now. For example, the show Rick and Morty.
Yes.
That
a cartoon show that completely explores all the ramifications of
the
multiple.
multiverse. Yeah. But it's interesting because for a long time, and people that create shows are always saying this or writing this in books or in their autobiographies or whatever. that there's a notion among producers in Hollywood that like, oh no, that's too smart for the audience or whatever, or too smart for broad appeal. They said that about Star Trek, the original series before it came out. And I think hopefully they'll learn, actually, no, there are large audiences for things that are more thoughtful and, you know, contemplative. And I think we're seeing...
If it's presented right.
Yeah.
I mean,
The Good Place. My gosh, what a fantastic show.
Yes,
However,
I object to spoilers.
I've only seen the first season. So,
Right.
Yeah, that
You
one...
need to see the second season, man.
I shouldn't do spoilers.
I'm waiting for it to hit Netflix.
I did.
Yep.
Season 2 hit Netflix?
Season 2 hit Netflix.
Cool.
Time to binge.
Like last night, Black Panther hit, so I watched it.
Yeah,
right.
cool. Well, we'll have to do a marathon of The Good Place.
Sure.
Because it has so much rewatch. Never mind. All right.
Yeah.
This is not Netflix
By the way,
review.
I
of the show.
successfully predicted the season finale of season 1 of The Good Place on episode 2.
Wow. All right.
All right.
It's
Okay. No.
I'm just saying, I nailed that.
Cool.
And I love Christian Bale. And
Yes.
if you have not seen Reefer Madness the musical, you are missing out on one of the finest things that's ever been produced. All right.
Well, I have to see that. But your question
that was quite
we're
a question,
still
yeah.
ostensibly
I still want to
answering is-
trap a Christian in the watchmaker argument and to get him to say, you know, if I say, how do you distinguish the watch from the beach? Well, they'll say, well, one's designed and the other's not.
Right.
I'll have to go, I agree with you 100%.
Yes.
I just didn't expect you to throw your God under the bus so readily.
Yeah, and just cautionarily, what they will say is that God created the processes that create the sand, but didn't actually create the
that's
sand.
terrible. That's
Well,
terrible.
that's if they are good at apologetics.
You won't find that many people who actually do it, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Having gone through this many, many times.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Right.
Yeah, it's one of the things, looking back at any time that questions like this arise in like news media, which is rare because everyone shies away from the subject.
Yeah.
You know, but they're so bad at the arguments. Like I mean,
Some are better than others.
Yeah, well,
and
yeah,
some
but-
have done, actually, some incredibly smart people have done their best job to reconcile their notion of the supernatural
Right.
with what we know about the natural. For example, Blake and I had a conversation, or 20, about the supernatural. And at the end of the day, Blake just thinks, okay, number one, you can't exclude the supernatural, and I think we have evidence for it. Therefore, in a Bayesian sense, it's more likely that there's supernatural, kind of. And he's going to beat me up a little for paraphrasing him. But my thing is really simple, and that is, I am not aware of any evidence that I could reasonably conclude the best explanation for this is something supernatural. Because in order for something to serve as an explanation, I have to know it exists and understand it. And his primary complaint is, well, if you had to know it exists first, there's all kinds of science we couldn't do. And I'm like, no, that's not the case, because science is based on natural observations. The fact that we observe or we speculate from the mouth of what we know that there's, you know, the Higgs boson is a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, how different would the world be if the supernatural was real?
Yeah. I really can't say.
It would be incredibly different.
It depends on which supernatural people have described, right?
Right.
Like,
Well, you know, we've asked before, what would it be like if God was real? Okay?
Yeah.
And the thing is, would it be vastly different? Yeah, in many cases, I think, depending on the definition of God, the world we experience would be very different from the one we do. However, if the definition of God is everything happens according to God's plan, and you can pray, and God will or won't do what he does or doesn't want to do, then it would look just exactly like this universe. And instead, but the problem is, you wouldn't have a God that is participating and encouraging human activities in any detectable way. You would have a God that is intentionally making himself appear equivalent to random chance.
Right.
Yeah.
And with that means that God is functionally undetectable, which means every believer is claiming to detect the undetectable.
Right. And identify it.
Yeah.
yeah. It also
Because it's like, okay, they also believe in the father of lies.
like
So Christians can be swindled by ordinary human beings.
Yes.
yeah.
And yet the father of lies raises his ugly head, and they're all instantly immune.
Yeah.
Well,
What
they're
the hell is
protected.
that
Jesus who
about?
protects them.
Jesus protects them
but if I
from
was-
father of lies, but not from the con man down the street, obviously.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should be able to do that yourself because those are both natural and one is supernatural. That's why God doesn't jump in with the con man.
Yeah.
He's trying to, you smart, get you some street smart.
You've got a
boys.
supernatural liar with with unknown powers of persuasion, and it's
and that
like
gets back to the question I've asked over and over again, which I've never gotten a satisfactory answer to, which is, okay, you believe that there's a God and you believe that there's a Satan. Mm-hmm. How do you tell which one's the good one and which one's not?
right.
Or why would you even, I guess a better question would be, why would you assume that either of them is the good one and one is not?
Right.
Yeah.
Heck, looking at the Bible, it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if I was the ultimate evil, first thing I'd do is, obviously make sure that people were doubtful that I even existed. But the plan would be to, as long as the good one is not interfering, which evidently he doesn't, would be to convince people that I'm the good one.
Right.
And that way, when all of my little minions were running around raping children, and when I set up criminal organizations to shield them from prosecution, people who had already become convinced that I was the good one would defend all of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, they wouldn't necessarily defend the action. They would just they would dismiss it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or defend the institution.
Well, that's not my
that you've
church.
set up. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Those weren't real Christians.
It's almost like you're making allusions to things that are happening in the world
Almost.
today. Yes. Yeah.
That's the other thing is one of my favorite passages is let God be true and every man a liar, because then when you ask them, there are people who think that God wrote the book. That's a very, very, very tiny portion.
Right.
The rest of them think that men wrote the book and they were just inspired by God. So if men wrote the book, then all men are lying and the book is wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Except that the book would also be wrong about let God be true and every man a liar.
Yeah.
So now you're in the paradox category territory.
Created a paradox.
Well,
yes, which is awesome.
A seemingly one, but it doesn't mean that because only if the I don't know that would negate the claim that it was there. It would just mean that you couldn't believe that that statement was true, but it wouldn't mean that the opposite was necessary.
Yeah, the only thing it means is that if you believe that one verse, you can have no reliable foundation for any of the verses, including that one.
Yeah.
And no matter, now we'll assume that one's true. It still draws into question the reliability of every verse, including that one. Right. And if we assume that verse is not true, we've already assumed that the book cannot be true, and now all of a sudden we have no reason to have any reliable expectation that it's correct. And so now we're in a position where, much like judging prophets, we'd have to look at the book, take a claim from the book, and then go out and investigate to confirm that it's actually true.
Oops.
And it's like the Muslims in their Quran.
We'll have to use that scientific method, darn it.
Or Muslims in the Quran or Christians with regard to the Bible will say, but the Bible or the Quran have revealed scientific truths. No, they didn't. They made claims. They weren't scientific truths until science stepped in to confirm this.
Right.
They also weren't claims until science stepped in and provided the answer, and then they figured out that, oh, no, wait, we had it all along, apparently.
They were bald-ass assertions.
Handy retrofit.
And it's sort of also like, this thing about there was the word, and that means, wavelengths, and then there was light, and like...
If the Bible is talking about the germ theory of disease, then why didn't people 2,000 years ago go, we'll have to wash our hands and do all this stuff?
Well,
why didn't they do that?
Well, they did wash their hands, and in part because the Bible said to wash your hands. But I find it not very remarkable that a human being messing around in the blood and guts of his latest kill decided that, or noticed after a period of time that he remained healthier and the food probably tasted better if he washed his damn hands before he actually ate it.
Yeah. Well, that and there's you naturally don't want to get stuff in your food. right? Like as a human instinct almost. But if you read, there's stuff in the Talmud about
because we're
that.
the descendants of the people who decided not to do that.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's a evolutionary
lucked out.
process. Yeah, there's passages in the Talmud though that describe the process by which they determined that it was God's will that they not, for example, eat pork because the people were getting sick and dying, and they thought it was from things they were eating, and so they effectively decided, oh, we won't eat. I think at one point it was like food that's green or something that doesn't make any sense, and that didn't help. So clearly that wasn't God's will.
It's kind of a science-ish.
Almost, yeah.
Except you know where that leads. That leads to something else that's going on right now.
Uh-oh, what's that?
Jordan Peterson's daughter
oh, no, I haven't heard this.
had all sorts of medical issues growing up, and so she decided that she was going to start eliminating things from her diet. Now she eats only meat, salt, and water. No vegetables, no nothing. Now,
does she cook it?
Yes.
Okay.
But she is on a meat-only diet. And, by the way, she's selling her coaching ability, not promising that she's got any experience, because she doesn't, in a proper balanced diet or anything medical at all. But she's basically selling this.
Marketing agent.
And she's convinced her dad, which I can affirm, as I've eaten dinner with the man, to only eat meat with salt and water. And they claim that it's cured their depression and countless other things. Now, I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying that the bulk of medical science shows that this is actually dangerous, that you are missing essential nutrients, and that there's a good reason to think that this is primarily like placebo effect. But if there's anything to this, it needs to be explored scientifically, and then we can validate whether or not that's the case. But my concern is not that they're necessarily doing it, although I have some concerns because there's health issues. And doctors have come out and said, I'll be surprised if she's not dead in a couple of years, you know. But if she's not, maybe it's because she cheated, maybe it's because we're wrong about things, who knows. But I think it's just as irresponsible to say, hey, I removed everything from my diet except for gummy bears, and I lost 40 pounds.
Like,
there you go.
And I'm feeling
Good
great
for
and
you.
healthy, and my head is no longer fuzzy, and because I can tell you that I eat a lot of gummy bears, and I stopped eating a lot of other stuff. And for a minute there, I thought, I wonder if maybe these gummy bears are so like nutrient deprived that they just sit in my stomach as a mass, absorb the bad stuff, and then you poop them out, and they don't contribute anything to the body.
The gummy bear cleanse.
It is the gummy bear cleanse. There is a path from this sort of exploratory, let me try stuff out, to then I've reached a conclusion. That does not science make. And I think it is dangerously there's gummy bears.
People are eating gummy bears.
I think it is dangerously irresponsible. I mean, I know legally she's not saying that she's actually got any expertise, but she's basically selling, I think, for $75 for a half hour for people to come to her so that she can tell them her story and let them know that it could be all right for them to go on a meat-only diet. Now, I would like to encourage all the ethical vegans in the world to, launch their ire at the people who are encouraging a meat-only diet instead of those of us who are just saying, hey, I'm not convinced it's necessarily immoral.
Yeah, as I've said in the past, vegans attack, basically. But hashtag vegans attack. But we'll see if that does anything. Yeah, that sounds ridiculously dangerous. How long has she been doing that? Do you know?
I don't know, but one of the major papers major news sources just wrote an article about her like in the last week. I knew about this back when we did our event together in Toronto.
It is a step up from a breatharian.
Yeah.
So it's got that.
At least you're eating something.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were breathing in the aura of the sun or something.
Something. I don't know what they think they're doing.
I
know what I think they're doing. They're thinking they're sneaking food from McDonald's. That's what they think they're doing.
Well, actually, and so Peterson went on, I think, Joe Rogan's podcast and was talking about this, and Joe was trying to hit him on it, and Peterson said that when they eat something other than meat, it fundamentally throws their system off. So I think he ate something like, I don't know, bread or a cracker or soup, and then he did not sleep for 20 some odd days. And so Joe was asking him, or maybe it was 30 days, I don't know. It was asking him something about what that's like. And he's like, well, you go to bed and you lay there and you can't sleep and then you get up and you keep going. And the person who wrote the article did something wonderful, which was to show that the world record for not sleeping was significantly less than what Jordan was claiming.
Yeah.
And that, if nothing else, lets you know that either Jordan Peterson should be in the Guinness Book of World Records for sleeping less than anybody, which, by the way, puts you in a dangerous mental state such that you should not be listened to and considered an authority.
Oh, yeah.
Or he's exaggerating or outright lying.
Yeah.
Let's figure out which
one or the other.
Yep. Either he is accurately describing what occurred or inaccurately describing what occurred. And I know which way I lean on that.
Yeah.
Just based on what we know. Damn. It's kind of a shame sometimes that I became, from a weird angle, like a skeptic and found ethics, because $75 for half an hour, like that, I don't know. I just think about rent far more often.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. That's terrible. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit thrown off. I wasn't thinking about being given terrible diets, or diets that, again, I'm not a nutritionist, but appear to fly in the face of everything that nutritionists have said.
What, just to get things back to nonprofits, we usually do news.
Well, yeah.
The Pope came out with some comments about the
diets, or
the Pennsylvania.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
And it didn't really sit well.
Really?
Yeah.
There's people calling for him to resign.
There's people. He's saying he's calling for some sort of silence. And it's like
from the church and all of its representatives, presumably.
Would be.
Wow.
Let me see if I can.
I mean,
find
if you are ranking them in terms only of like first, second, third, I think he's still probably up there for me, but only because all the other ones are terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, what am I thinking of? The one before Ratzinger was that Paul II.
I think I've got it.
Yeah. Seemed like he, I mean, unless I find out that he was also directly involved, although it would be hard for him not to be, in some amount of covering up massive international child rape.
Yeah, this is from USA Today.
Oh,
yeah.
What do they say?
The title of the article is Pope, answer those who only seek scandal with silence and prayer. So people who only seek scandal and division must be answered with silence and prayer, Pope Francis said on Monday as the Catholic Church continued to grapple with controversy surrounding allegations of sexual abuse. Francis, in a homily during Mass at Vatican City, did not specifically address the growing scandal, but he said even families can have division over topics such as politics, sports, and money. Curious that somebody would acknowledge that, hey, there can be disagreement when there's disagreement directed to them, as if there's no truth here.
Yeah.
Quote,
families can have disagreements over child rape. Yeah.
Quote, with people lacking goodwill, with people who only seek scandal, who seek only division, who seek only destruction, even within the family, respond with silence and prayer.
Oh, boy.
Francis and the Church have been hammered in recent weeks by a series of sexual abuse-related issues. In July, Washington Cardinal Theodore McCarrick resigned amid claims of abuse. Then 3 weeks ago, the Pennsylvania Attorney General released a grand jury report alleging that church leaders protected more than 300 predator priests in 6 Roman Catholic dioceses across Pennsylvania. And oh, by the way, I think I saw news today that like the number 3 guy in the Catholic Church has just been accused of stuff as well.
Oh, directly?
Wow.
But this is... So for clarity, and I was never Catholic, but what the Pope's doing is saying he doesn't want to address what's actually going on, and probably for very good reasons.
Oh, yeah.
I imagine the Pope's lawyers have encouraged him to not address this.
Yeah.
So what he's saying is when people come to you and they seem to only be focused on scandal, don't engage with them, just pray for them.
Right.
However, what we're talking about here is not someone who is only seeking scandal. The results of this investigation, I should say, the results of these investigations were not necessarily about people looking for a scandal.
No,
it was about people reporting a crime and the justice system seeking to determine what the facts were around the crime. And the facts are that the Catholic Church is a corrupt criminal organization that has been protecting rapists forever, as far as we can tell.
Yeah.
I mean, the United States has a list of state sponsors of terror. Does they have a list of state sponsors of international child rape?
I don't know.
I mean, the answer is no. It's a rhetorical question.
Yeah.
But I say it's a rhetorical question after answering it. But
well, the Vatican, as a city-state, should be declared a hostile nation.
Yeah.
I shoulda, coulda, woulda. Right?
We have extradition treaties with various countries. There are places where you can go where they don't have extradition back to the United States, so criminals go there and hide out. And apparently, one of those is Vatican City.
Yeah. I was going to say, can you list those countries for me, unrelated, for a friend? No.
Asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend, place that doesn't...
Just think of the worst places with the worst reputations for drug lords and no good legal protections for civil rights. Those are probably the ones that don't have extradition treaties with the U.S. I mean, I wouldn't run away to the UK if you're trying to escape prosecution.
No, that...
And by the way, evidently, like Vatican City's protection only applies to priests. I mean, I think if you just like robbed a bank and tried to go there, the Pope would turn your ass in, even though he won't turn his buddies in.
Well, I think even without an extradition treaty, two nations can agree on things based on their domestic law.
Yeah.
Yep.
By the way, if there are Catholics listening, I don't necessarily think that you are evil in the intentional sense of you are intentionally supporting evil. But we are long past the time where any of you can pretend that when you go in to Mass and you put money in the donation plate, that money is necessarily going to good causes, because we know that money is going to lawyers, it's going to those who are protecting these, it is going to the further corruption of your religion. And you can sit there all day long and say, oh, this isn't my church isn't like this, except that every time we investigate one of these things, we find out that, yes, it is in fact your church. And even if it's not, maybe your church should separate from the Holy Roman, Emperor.
Yeah.
Call yourself something else if your church is so innocent.
But you are now at a point where if you are not publicly stating your objections to what the head organization has done and calling for removing yourselves from any connection there, you are now complicit. You are absolutely complicit, and you're doing it because you grew up Catholic and you see we feed the homeless and we run shelters and we've done all this good stuff, except that we don't nearly do enough of that. And for those of you who, by the way, who want to try to raise Mother Teresa, she was an absolute awful troll, and I recommend reading Christopher Hitchens' book, Missionary Position, to find out that basically she was fetishizing suffering.
Yeah, the quotes in there are pretty damning, actually. Like, literally saying, no, I don't want to reduce the suffering of the poor.
Of course not. It's necessary.
Yeah, it brings them closer to Christ.
Yes.
Because Christ suffered.
Yes.
That's not...
Right.
Yeah, he suffered for,
anti-human at all.
A day.
Yeah, he gave up,
and then he
sacrificed his weekend for you.
Barely.
Sir.
Not even a weekend.
I mean, he took a weekend trip to hell if you're Catholic. Yeah. Or to America if you're Mormon.
Yes.
Actually, no, that's a selling point for the LDS
Maybe America
church.
is hell.
Yeah, well, no, I was gonna say better vacation spots. Even Jesus agrees, but no, we can talk in the abstract about at what point a person who is part of an organization is directly complicit. But at this point, you can participate in literally everything that you just said. You can go and you can take the food and hand it to a homeless person, and you can pray the rosary, and you can attend church, and you can put $0 in the offering plate.
By the way, first of all, anything I say is my own opinion and not necessarily representative of the atheist community of Austin or the nonprofits or anything else.
Here's our disclaimer.
But I'm going to be fair And while atheism isn't a top-down sort of organization, it's not like we have dogma or, you know, whoever's running a particular organization is not like the Pope.
Right.
They're basically, you know, a CEO of a nonprofit, et cetera.
Are you saying I'm not a Pope?
You are not.
Excommunicated. That's the
Pope of the atheists.
Let's see how well that works out for you.
Sorry.
But we should be careful to not pretend that the secular community is above things like this. Now, we don't have the particular scandals going on, but there are plenty of other scandals. There are a number of prominent male secularists who have been accused of being inappropriate with women. Some of them we know for a fact this is, you know, the case.
Accurate,
and others we don't. The mistake is if you try to pretend like, oh, we are the utopian.
No, I think
we need to fix stuff.
I think the thing you point to is what the response is.
Yes.
So, for example, like you were touring around with Krauss when that broke, and then he was off the circuit. I think I brought this up the week that the thing broke. The Pope and all of the cardinals and all of the bishops and all of the priests are still there, right? They're not. They're protected by the organization still, and I don't know.
Well, when it went down, when this thing with Krauss, and first of all, I will say that all my interactions with Lawrence Krauss were positive. I had a good time. I enjoyed his company, and nothing that he was actually accused of that was substantive comes close to what we're talking about. But setting that aside, we knew of issues, and basically Sam and I decided or Sam mostly, but I went along with it. We were going to do that one event without him. But immediately, when I did not make a statement within the first week or so that I'm renouncing Lawrence Krauss and will never work with him again,
you cut.
I was compared to the Catholic Church.
Sure.
And so this problem of hyperbole on the part of the left or the far left or the secularists or whatever else is a big deal, because eventually I pointed out that, no, I don't have any plans to ever work with Krauss again. I think that there were things that he could have done to potentially, you know, rehabilitate himself and work, and he wasn't taking those steps. And that's his prerogative. I'm not saying that he's, you know, a monster or anything else. I'm just saying I don't have any reason to ever want to work with him again until he takes the steps that he needs. That's the way things should work. By the way, if there's a crime, there should be, you know, witnesses and prosecution to the extent that we can. If it's not so much a crime, but it's, hey, this person is repeatedly inappropriate in a certain setting, then those people in charge need to remove that person from that setting to not put them up on a pedestal. And there also needs to be the option for rehabilitation, to say, you know what, holy crap, I had no idea, or I did this all wrong, and now but you shouldn't have some expectation that you're ever going to be welcome back in the same capacity you were. There's another individual who will remain nameless.
Oh yeah,
who basically, after 4 months of not being in the limelight, decided to post an open letter to say, you know, I've been working on myself and I'm so much better. And by the way, here's the problems with the atheist community, and I'm ready to come back and lead. And I was like, oh, no, you fucking don't.
Yeah, I mean, I am charged by the bylaws of this organization to respect privacy. However, I can tell you from past experience and the current policies of the board of the atheist community of Austin that the atheist community of Austin has a much better record of handling anything that even fits into this category at all better than the Roman Church at the moment.
And probably better than some others. One of the
and
things
yet we're the ones that eat babies still.
One of the things is that I've been through this with different organizations from different sides. And I made a post to some friends of mine in a private group about how absolutely sick I am of lawyers, although I recognize they're valuable.
Oh, yeah.
The problem is that there needs to be more transparency, and yet we live in the sort of culture where that transparency is effectively impossible, because even a nuisance suit that has no grounds can bury and bankrupt an organization really quickly.
Yeah, we need federal anti-SLAPP legislation.
Yeah.
Which is strategic lawsuit against public participation. So it's you criticize, for example, I don't know, I know that this has happened No, if I've described it as frivolous in this way, I shouldn't name anyone because I don't want to get sued. But this has happened with people that promulgate ideas about what is healthy to eat and weird quasi-non-science crap that they sell books on and gain notoriety that they're not deserving because they're not an expert on anything, this hypothetical person that is not a specific person. And they sue and are unbelievably litigious to any criticism because they know that lawsuits are expensive and the other guy's got to pay for it as well. So.
And Westboro Baptist Church has done that as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I mean,
I will not say that that is their primary motivation. There are other people who've accused them of that they're doing all this shock value, God hates fags type stuff in order to have people do things so that they can then sue because that's their primary funding. I think it's funny that there's a number of people in that family who are lawyers.
Oh, yeah.
And that, you go to church that's based on, I'm not saying that's their primary motivation, but they are litigious. And the thing is, I value legal protections, but the system is never, ever going to be perfect. And one of the things we need to recognize is that I've seen some oversimplifications on these things where people will say, going back to accusations relative to Me Too movement and other things like that, it's like, well, why didn't they go to the cops? Okay, you have a completely bizarre understanding about the way things actually work.
Right.
Because, first of all, if it's a he said, she said type of situation, you can wind up putting the victim on trial, making them relive an experience. And for a lot of people, it's just much easier to say, no, I want to ignore this and hope that it never happens again.
Make it go away.
And this is how we help support the monsters know how to get away with this.
Oh,
they know how to pick,
the
victims. It's just not that simple. It'd be great if it was that simple. Hey, you wronged me. I'm going to take action against you, and the law is going to do justice right, except that equating the law with justice is just boneheadedly stupid at this point.
Yep.
Because it's not that.
Yeah. No, there are aspects of justice that, so the relationship between law and justice and government and a citizen are things that were talked about by Socrates. And
it's been around a while.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm completely opposed to the notion of like vigilante justice.
Yeah.
But I completely understand where it comes from.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the motivation,
And to tie this back to religion, it's because we fundamentally know that we would prefer a world that is fair.
Yeah.
That where the unjust are not rewarded, where the just are not punished, where if you're wronged, there's some recompense. And when we see that in the universe that we inhabit, that is not the case.
Does not
We have a couple of options. We can believe in a fictional, all-knowing, all-loving being who's going to reward and punish after life, or a cosmic karmic sense that will reward and punish in the next life. Or we can implement laws to do the best we can as flawed beings to try to salvage some aspect of justice. And I'm stuck with number 3 because the first 2 just aren't
all
true.
we got.
Yeah. It's true. Also, there's something to be said about society, particularly in an era of mass communication and changing the culture, right? Like there was a time in the recent past where being born a bastard was a problem for you, not just your parents. And that,
Right.
I mean, I wasn't alive when that stigma was as strong as it had been, but there's a lot of things that play into that. And
There was a lot of stigma on divorce
for a long time.
up until the 80s.
Yeah. And then still then, when did the United States have no-fault divorce?
Oh, I don't know when it.
Let me quiz you about law and or transition into the news story that I'm sure anyone that has seen the news this week in the United States or about the United States has seen, which is that the Kavanaugh appointment is making its way through the Senate for Senate hearings. Did either of you catch much of that or read much on it?
It's just another shuddersome, horrible thing that's happening. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's only going to be so interesting because there's a majority in the Senate. There's all of this politics in the background, but Kavanaugh's motivations would be to not give any interesting answers.
Right.
The less interesting or revealing his answers, the better off he's going to be, probably. I don't know. Did you catch any of the
I did. I didn't catch much. Certainly not as much as Tracy has. As a matter of fact, some of Tracy's recent posts on Facebook prompted me to actually turn it on, because I've watched the Senate hearings, the confirmation hearings for past Supreme Court justices, and I've seen a trend that I really didn't want to watch this time through. So I've only seen a couple of minutes here and there, and it pretty much convinced me that it's more of the same. Because once upon a time, what'll happen is you'll have politicians that will give lip service to, I'm not going to have a litmus test for judges, and yet they absolutely have a litmus test for judges.
Yeah.
There are special interest groups who, on both sides, by the way, this is not a criticism of any particular party or anything else, they want their judges. And so, and a lot of it goes back to abortion as a primary focus. But setting aside any of the specific issues, what I've seen happen at confirmation hearings is lawyers are crafty and creative with how they respond to things. And so ideally, you would want to get to know the person that you're considering for this appointment. And so it would make sense to go through their past decisions, to ask for their, to see what ideals they were using to justify those statements that they've made, like, hey, you can't, actually impeach us, or you can't prosecute, indict a sitting president. You should go through those. You should also get them to give their opinion on Supreme Court rulings and what, things that they might have objection to. When this thing here that's been sitting here for precedent, are you fine with that being a precedent, or do you think this was a mistake that you would, be open to overturning? But what happens is, even when those questions are asked, the lawyers give answers like, well, I would have to consider the independent merits of each individual case. I have a view of what the Constitution is supposed to do, and each case being different, I cannot speculate as to what I would do were this to come up, because every case being different might result in different rulings. And what did you learn from that?
Yeah, nothing.
Nothing.
What happens if you ask them about what was going through your mind in this previous judgment?
Well, I was going to say is I think the fundamental problem is the quality of questions, right? So there's a few podcasts I listen to and research that I do, and I'm not sure how friendly this statement will be in current company, but if I were to get a job that requires any postgraduate anything, it would be, in the back of my mind, I'm still thinking about being a lawyer eventually. So,
I'll pray for you.
I hope that gets clipped. I'm going to send that to my mother. But the quality of the questions, right? So there's a lot of concern and talking about Roe and whether or not Roe v. Wade is going to get overturned, and that's obvious. But no one is asking, one, the question that gets them to say, yes, they honor stare decisis and precedent is important, which is, okay, if there's previous law, how much do you lean into, judicial activism? Do you respect good law and would avoid overturning it if those were the facts? And then when they give the answer that they have to, even if they are judicial activists like this nominee and the previous nominee that are objectionable to anyone with a notion of jurisprudence that doesn't include activism, regardless of whether or not you would want a conservative justice, this one ain't it. After you ask them that, you ask them, okay, so is Obergefell good law? Because that one's recent. That one hasn't stood for a long time. That one's in my mind for whatever reason, he says with his rainbow suspenders. But it's the case that established the marriage equality. Right. Because you've then asked them the one question that says they have to honor good law, and then after that, whether or not they would honor that, and that actually is an issue that's important, right? But
I wish.
Yeah, no. I mean, lawyers are lawyers, when they are lawyers, are paid, one, to think on their feet, and two, to think as cleverly as they can to devise the best language in legal terms to give answers and make arguments.
To make sure you don't get in trouble. And so while I agree that maybe, and I don't know what questions were asked, I don't know whether or not they asked him about whether or not the right to privacy in Roe is, because you can rip Roe apart in a number of different directions and address the different claims made in there, one of them being the right to privacy. And that's one that comes under attack. And so I would think that it would be possible for someone to say, yes, I think Roe was unfairly decided on the grounds of privacy, yet there may be other grounds by which abortion could be protected, or, you know, this. But you're not going to hear that. No matter how good you frame the question, what they're going to say is, no matter how much of an activist they're going to be, they are going to say, I'm not a judicial activist. I respect the law. However, there may be parts of a ruling where I could agree with the final ruling, but find flaws within the reasoning there, where we could narrow the focus of it. There may be somewhere we could broaden the focus of it. And on those things, I would have to consider it on a case-by-case basis.
Consider the merits of the case at hand.
And that's why I think these confirmation hearings are futile. Because, quite frankly, I don't see any likelihood that the candidate put forward by the party in power is ever going to have any hope of getting shut down the way like Neil Bork did. I don't think that can ever happen again.
Well, I mean, it depends on...
or in the current climate, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on if the party that the president belongs to has a majority in the Senate.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that there being a split White House Senate.
And whether or not, you know, they're a lame duck president and then they just decide not to take his nominee.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court has been hijacked. And by the way,
oh my God,
my wife repeatedly warned people of this throughout the entire 2016 election, irrespective of whether you were Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green, whatever.
Yeah.
Anytime a political discussion would come up on her thing, in much the same way that the old quote about "it's the economy, stupid," she would just post, "It's about the goddamn motherfucking Supreme Court." That's it.
Right.
And she's been absolutely right. And because here's the thing, president's only going to be around for a certain amount of time. Supreme Court appointments are for life. And they shape every aspect of this. And while I constantly remind people that running for state boards of education and local, that is where some real law and real changes take place, there's no denying there is nothing. Balance of powers aside, there is nothing more powerful than the Supreme Court. And if it is in the hands of dangerous ideologues, and by the way, yes, I recognize that I would also want to put it in the hands of people who those who disagree with me think are dangerous ideologues.
Right.
Well, I want 9 Ruth Bader Ginsburgs on the court. That's my personal.
Are we going to slip into the ethics of cloning and whether or not a clone of a person can also? No.
If cloning came about today and it was possible to write a law where you could clone a current justice, I mean, there's a lot of little things that go in there. She would probably even be my nominee for the first clone.
But would it be like a, never mind. This is a rabbit trail that I choose not to go down at this moment in time. What I would say about that is, sure, I would appoint different justices than I think a conservative president would, but I wouldn't ever, at least I can't imagine myself ever appointing an activist, regardless of what their ideas about what rulings they would change and what law or precedents they would overturn.
Kind of depends on how you define activist, because I don't think either of us would put RBG as an activist.
No, I mean, as far as I'm aware, she's never decided blatantly just like, well, you know, this law should be overturned and I'm going in to find a reason.
Kennedy, who...
Well, I'm not sure what you're specifically...
Justice Kennedy invented a grandfather clause out of whole cloth in order to allow the Ten Commandments monument to stand.
Oh, that,
and the other Ten Commandments things to go away.
Yeah,
I remember that.
I honestly haven't read the reasoning on that case or talked to a lawyer.
It doesn't
your
take
favorite
much.
people. No, it probably doesn't take much. But what I would say is that a person that doesn't go into it saying, I will follow precedent and reason along these lines, right? You have a judicial jurisprudence that comes with a judicial philosophy, but it's very different than, for example, Gorsuch plainly signaling everywhere that he would love to overturn the Chevron deference, which is a larger part of... I don't know, it seems wrong to call it a conservative strategy for the future because I think the word conservative has been hijacked by theocrats in this country, but a conservative plan to totally fuck up the court system.
Well, let me ask you this then.
I have strong opinions.
I think we would agree that none of them would openly declare I'm an activist judge.
I don't think that any Supreme Court justice nominee at this point in time would use those words.
Right. Of those who you would consider to be an activist judge, how many of those do you think on some level know that what they're doing would be considered an activist judge?
You know,
rather than a rationalization of, you know, here's
I'm
the
not
law.
sure how they would characterize it themselves, but mostly it's, do you care about the fundamental principles of stare decisis, of precedent, and whether or not that matters? Or, well, these are the results that I want to have in cases, therefore I will rule in this way in future cases. So, for example, if a person can say, well, there's a case about abortion that's headed to the Supreme Court, if that person can say in their mind or out loud, yes, I would rule in favor of the fetus or whatever it is, then that person, like, if you are able to form already an idea of how you would rule based on what you want the future of the country to be rather than on the merits of the case and the precedent that applies to it, then in my mind, you are departing from the law and are engaging in activism and legislating from the bench.
I would agree with you, and yet that's exactly what I would do as a judge, because while I would be happy, so I'm torn on stare decisis. I'm torn on the notion of precedent because I think there are bad precedents and an opportunity to change those. And I'm not
there are landmark cases that overturn that, right? Like Brown v. Board, sorry.
Sure, no, I'm just saying, I'm not saying that it's based on a personal ideology. It's also not merely based on the Constitution, because I think the Constitution can be wrong. However, I realize that the Constitution is the document that I have to stick with, and I respect judges who have said, you know what, I'd really like to change this, but this is something that needs to be changed through Congress. That part, it's more about respecting the Constitution than it is about respecting precedent, because I think there are precedent that are unconstitutional. And I think if you make those cases, I'm good with changing it.
Yeah.
Now,
well, that falls into that same judicial philosophy, right? You respect and follow precedent until you can reach the conclusion logically that you've lost the script so much that you've gone so far flung that, wow, based on, changing notions, particularly things that change in reality. I don't know how long it will be before a privacy case comes up to the Supreme Court about digital privacy and the analogy of, well, if you've thrown it away and the trash can isn't on your property anymore, literally cannot it be applied to Facebook at all. I don't know how long it will be before there's some sort of ruling that needs to be relatively novel about these things.
Yeah.
But ruling on the facts of the law and the facts of the precedent and knowing that, well, sure, there is this correction. Well, sure, Plessy v. Ferguson is terrible, and these are the reasons why, right? You're not a slave to precedent. It's just that you believe, or rather the judicial philosophy is that you believe in the ideal of a consistency and stability in the law.
Overturning precedent is something that should be entered into with caution, and when there's an overwhelming demonstration that this needs to change. Yeah. The other thing I could never be, a la Scalia, is an originalist, because I literally could not give less of a crap about what the original
founding
authors
fathers
thought, because that is basically saying these guys couldn't have been wrong.
Yeah. But it's worse than that. It's whatever my interpretation of historically they would have wanted is. And the argument can be well made that what they wanted is what we get, which is this evolving idea of justice that matches the evolving nature of reality.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. We had some pretty decent founding fathers who were fairly smart and had some foresight. But if we're going to try to pretend that they had anything in their head that resembles today,
no,
oh, God,
of course not.
That's
right. Jefferson still wanted to.
They came up with a fair game design, but boy, once one party gets all the marbles, it's like, oh, we've met our victory condition. Yay!
Well, even if you just go back and read through the Federalist Papers and the arguments of do big republics or small republics do better at controlling factions, and they argue, no, it's big republics. We should unite and have this constitution. I don't know whether small republics or big republics do it
It's voting,
better.
It's voting methods.
Well, yes, voting methods, but also very clearly factionalism hasn't been. That is what we call political parties today.
The one we're using now forces a two-party system.
So when you're first past the post.
Yeah.
So take the biggest republic that was in existence at the time they were comparing big republics and small republics, and compare that to the size of republics now.
Yeah. Well, are you talking about the
every
United
aspect,
Kingdom, or
I'm talking about population. I'm talking about the way we divide up districts. I'm talking about financial stuff. Everything is expanded bigger than they could have reached. They didn't, at least at a minimum, they didn't have access to the data to reach a conclusion about what would be best for us in 2018.
They also didn't know that there were going to be more than 13 states.
Yes.
Like
Instead of the 50 and a half that we have right now.
Are you counting all of the territories as half, or like
just all of them? Puerto Rico, Guam, everything. They all add up to a half because none of them have the power that they should have.
None of them have any power. Well, presumably you can include D.C. in that now because they don't have a vote anymore, which is weird and different. I'm going to not sideline this into whether or not.
Hey, we need to talk more about religious stuff on the nonprofits and less about
sports. Well, to be clear, we're also in the United States, and the Supreme Court does lots of rulings and religious liberty and First Amendment violations. It's just I haven't done a good job of directing the conversation into recently the Masterpiece Cake Shop decision occurred.
There was some congressman recently who said, I think it was a congressman who said that somebody should be caned for saying something bad or doing something bad. I'm sure
there are some people who I wish would be McCain.
Sharia law right there. Thank you.
I saw a headline to that effect about something in, it may have been the Philippines, that no, we should have public canings because public canings will bring a smile to Allah's face, or whatever. And it's like, I really hope that we don't have to suffer through anything close to that level of theocracy here. Although, it ain't looking so great. Oy vey.
You were talking about earlier things that were being a bastard, being divorced, those things that were viewed and negative things. Somebody just actually sent in an email that I saw talking about Catholic nuns punishing the left-handed for using their left hand. Now,
oh man,
here's a little twist on this, which is the one reason I brought it up. It's very easy to frame that as a good thing.
Oh, all right. I don't usually flaunt that I'm a lefty, but now we're going to fight.
No. I'm not saying it is a good thing. I'm saying it's easy to frame it that way, and that is this. I'm trying to prepare you to go out into a world where left-handed things are rare. And so by encouraging you to conform to right-handed use, I am giving you the required things that you're going to need when you go out into this world. Putting you
ahead in...
Yes.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I've also now given you forcefully the ability to be ambidextrous. Should anything happen to either of your hand, you will still be able to do this.
Right.
So if you go through and you cherry pick those aspects of it, you can get to the point of this is a good thing. And the reason I mention that, not because it's Catholic or anything else, is because if anything in encouraging skepticism and critical thinking, it's about getting people to set aside their biases and to not just accept the first answer that comes along. Because we are quick to overlook personal freedom and autonomy when it seems like we're doing this for your own good.
Yeah.
And the number of things that we could do for someone's own good, whether we're talking about forced infant circumcision, where there's a potential case along those lines, or forcing a left-handed person to learn to work with the right.
Or controlling someone's diet.
Yeah. We do all this stuff because we convince ourselves that we're doing it for your own good. And yet we've heard the same thing with regard to slavery. That ultimately, because these backward people were dragged from their country and put into the most prosperous nation in the world, we did them a favor, even though we did not. It's this level of rationalization, I think, also applies when we're talking about comparative ideologies with activist judges or anything with political party. there are people who are legitimately convinced that they're doing good because they have myopically focused on the positive aspects, cherry-picked to suit their case without considering the broader implications, without considering the things that contradict their view.
Well, I'm seeing more and more. It's like I'm responding more and more like, who does this thing? You know, the villain in the movie does this thing, not the hero, the villain. Why are you doing this thing?
You can go back to like Silence of the Lambs. It puts the lotion in the basket, and this is actually good for you because you'll have lotion, which moisturizes your skin. I'm looking out for you. Yes, I'm going to take your skin off to make myself a woman suit, but that'll actually do you good too because when I take your skin, you'll no longer be stuck in that little pit down there. You'll be dead. I'm freeing you.
I'll end
it's
the
a mercy killing.
Misery.
Here, let me save you from my torturous views.
Yeah, that sounds like a religion I've talked about before. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's kind of a fundamental problem with a lot of thinking that just about a lot of things, not just religion, is that you only apply the reasoning you're applying in a single case and then you move on. Yeah. It's all ad hoc and you don't connect your ideas. Right? It facilitates.
Yeah, there's also this weird thing with this toxic sense of fairness where, oh, somebody's getting something free from the government that I'm not getting.
Yeah.
Can't have that, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's like, well, I worked hard, and so why can't they be perfectly as successful as me? Because, like, differing circumstances, that's the answer.
Yeah, the thing is, the world is incredibly complicated.
Yep.
And the only way that we can get by in it is to simplify it. And that leads us to oversimplify.
Right.
We have to simplify some because we would all become
catatonic,
unable to do anything.
We'd be paralyzed, yeah.
But we sometimes take it too far. And it's a testament to how wonderful our brain is at both pattern recognition and problem solving. And yet, because we have limited information, we have limited abilities, we have limited time, we know that if I assume today is going to be pretty much like yesterday, I'm probably going to survive.
Yeah.
And so that gets us into a sense of complacency where there are things that we should be considering and reconsidering, and yet we don't. Because on some level, we know that it's unlikely to harm us up until it becomes obvious that it is harming us.
Right.
And that's why we care. You know, I care more about me than I do about the people around me, and I care more about them than I do about, you know, the people who live down the street.
Sure,
and I
your
care more about
sphere,
yeah. Your monkey scare. What?
Monkey sphere.
Monkey sphere. Okay.
Yes.
I was like, are you scared of monkeys? Is that what I missed that? So before we move on, I have a couple of things I'd like to say. If you'd like to support this show and be one of the people that makes it go, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thenonprofits. Description at the bottom of the screen. There, presumably, you could find other information about other ACA events, and you could find more information about this show and how to support it in the description below. And a very special today-only announcement. Today is the birthday of our chief awesome sound wizard, Vern. So happy birthday, Vern. Please continue to make the mics work.
Everything works
so almighty
well.
sound
And
god, Vern.
I'm glad Vern is in there. I don't know. Who's on video today?
On video today, it was Mark initially, but maybe Dave.
My apologies, because I just realized that I have not spent more than about 4 seconds actually looking at the camera the entire time. I've just been like,
me too.
I've done a lot of looking down into the middle distance.
Is so impressive that I can't bear to turn away to look at the camera.
On video, everybody looking in my ear hole, except I've got this.
Well, I think for me, it's, you know, having done the atheist experience all these years.
Yeah.
I naturally look at the camera.
Yeah.
But all the years that we did nonprofits, there was no video.
Right.
And so
we're just sitting around.
I just trained myself. Let me look at Dennis. Let me look at, hey, we're just saying. And I still have that little blue card table that we had set up.
Oh, God. Right.
We'll preserve it. And then at some point, we'll have like a giant museum, the history of atheism. And it'll be worth something.
That was a sad thing. The burning of the museum in
Alexandria? Brazil? That must have happened more recently
than. There
than.
was a huge natural history museum that burned to the ground, pretty much.
I haven't heard
A
anything
lot of
about
stuff
this.
got lost. Like the only thing that survived was the meteorite exhibits.
That caused the fire, or
No.
A meteor struck it, and so
But
they're
it
just going to
was
build
like-
the new museum around the meteor.
is it a
was
meteor that
huge
struck
fire.
it or a meteorite? Because I know that when it hits the ground, it becomes a meteorite. But if it hits the building, is it still a meteor, or does that count as ground?
Ooh, yeah.
Hey, we should get Phil Plait to answer that question.
We should. Well, actually,
people were.
yeah.
People were immediately drawing parallels with the fire, the burning of the library at Alexandria.
Well, was it?
'Cause it was a big
was it
museum.
done deliberately?
It was a big
or
no, I don't think so.
wasn't the one
It's
at?
just a real shame.
I suppose that they didn't have arson investigators investigating the fire at Alexandria, but I didn't know whether that was intentional or not either. Well, actually, we're coming up. That's right at 9. We ran long in some of our discussions, but I know we should keep it timely. Dennis, will you take us out?
I can do that.
For dinner?
I could do that, but
Could is the key. Yeah.
all right. Well, that was the recreation of our show, and we hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back with another clever representation of an episode in 2 weeks on September the 19th.